let's start at the beginning. How did you decide you wanted to make a film about the industrial music, or the history of the industrial music scene?
I decided about a few years ago. I was shooting for my first film, Paris, Berlin, 20 Years of Underground Techno, and I got interested into industrial music, and I started reading a lot on the subject and watching everything I could, and I couldn't find a movie that was strictly about industrial music, so I thought, why not do it myself? So when I was finished with my first film, I started shooting for this.
And just in terms of how you went about it, because something that struck me when I watched the film again earlier is that the way that the scene came out of punk, and that the whole idea of just do it kind of ethos and the DIY thing, it feels as though that you guys might have had that attitude when you started making the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Amelie's first film, Paris, Berlin, she started when she was 16 years old, as you do when you want to make a film. Pick up a camera, make it, release it worldwide, and then, yeah, she just did it again. So it's a big effort to be up here on stage at BFI releasing a film, so we're very proud to be here. Fantastic.
And so after tonight, the film is going on. It's going to run at the Institute of Contemporary Arts, just over the way.
Yeah. ICA's picked up some screenings. They're sold out for the first few, starting next weekend. We're off to Manchester tomorrow for Band on the Wall.
So everyone get on your social media and do tweet and spread the word about the film if you can.
Yeah, for sure. We distributed it ourselves, everything we did ourselves between the two of us. So we've got over 50 screenings worldwide and more emails to check when we get home.
Good stuff. Well done. So that seems like a good point to bring you guys in, Chris and Cosey, just because...
He's called me Cosey.
Cosey, sorry, Cosey.
That's all right.
My bad. One of the bits in the film that really resonated with me was when you were talking about the early days of Throbbing Gristle, and you were literally doing everything yourself, and it was the way that you were existing outside of the kind of the frameworks of the, if you like, the music industry, and I think there's a kind of resonance with the way that you guys have gone about this. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about how that felt at the time, to be just kind of just doing it out of pure kind of passion, I suppose.
Well, I think we're kind of forced into that, much like Amélie was. There wasn't anything out there that kind of spoke for what we wanted to say or what we believed in, really. So we created it ourselves, but we're also in the position where we didn't have the money, to buy equipment or anything like that. So it was all DIY, literally, or going to auctions and jumble sales, that kind of thing, picking stuff up. So it was really done on a real budget, if you like.
The first few years of Throbbing Gristle, we all had day jobs to fund what we were doing, which was mainly a weekend activity then, wasn't it?
Yeah. The weekends were sort of like nailed down as get to Martello Street Studio and see what we can do. And in between times, we, had to pay the rent and stuff like that, and the rent on the Martello Street Studio too. So it was just making enough money to make things happen for us, and just following it through, and meeting like-minded people as well in the process of that. We all sort of encouraged one another in that way, and it had a sort of ricochet and an effect where we all worked together at certain points and helped each other out, and then we all branched off on our own in our own right, really.
And that comes through in the film. And when you guys were making the film, how was it when you were reaching out and trying to get in touch with all of the different people that you wanted to interview and have their voice in the film?
That came pretty quick, really. I mean, we started discussing together about making the film, and just started emailing everyone, really, all the artists we wanted to get in touch with, and we started shooting like 3 weeks after. So, we just sort of decided to do it, and grabbed our cameras and went to the UK, started shooting, and that's it, really.
If you know Amélie, she's pretty efficient. I met her in Berlin at the Paris-Berlin screening. We hit it off, we started talking about music. I'm like, wow, you're very, very talented, very young, and very dedicated, and you want to follow something. And I was a journalist from Australia. I knew Steve Mall from Perth when he lived in Perth. Did radio there, and that was kind of my connection to industrial music. But when I met Amélie, I'm like, wow, you're so passionate. And you're a filmmaker, you're going to be a filmmaker, you're going to continue making films. So I said, let's do it. Let's make this film together. We'll just pull our ideas and make it happen. And yeah, it's amazing to be able to do it at such a young age with such talent already.
And when you were getting in touch with everyone, were everyone quite happy to be involved? And was that process costly or awkward, or was it quite pretty straightforward?
Everyone you just saw on screen, I suppose, was happy to be interviewed. The other we didn't feature them, and and yeah, it was costly to make, but we did it with our own money, and you know, we just like did it on the cheap for everything. Like we shot everything ourselves, I edited the film, we did all the post production, we did literally everything. We borrowed some gear for filming, and you know, edited it at home. So it's, you know, it's a pretty tight budget, but.
The microphones were lapel microphones. I think they were $5 to rent in Berlin. They weren't the best, but you know, we did it ourselves.
I think the thing that came across to me when you got in touch initially was that quite quickly I realised that you were doing this yourself, and that it was like a labour of love, and it had to be done. And I think you might have found a problem with other people is because loads of people have approached us over the years, and it's been a kind of vanity project or something that will feed their ego or their CV, and people aren't interested in that. So when you came through and it came obvious after a short while why you were doing it and how you were doing it, and it was, like you said, quite, you know, like, I'm going to do this, I'll make it work, you know, I'll hire things, I'll borrow things and all the rest of it. And I think when you realise that, you begin to think, okay, yeah, that's fine, you know, that's really good. And to be honest, if you hadn't done it, I don't know who else would have done it. Because somebody had to put all that together, and somebody that had the knowledge and the passion behind it to make it work the way it has. I don't know anyone that would have done it without going to Channel 4 or someone for backing.
Sure,
and that would not have worked.
I think, very good point. I think that's what I've been sort of scratching away at with the questions, is that there's something of the spirit of the time in the way that the
Totally,
the
and
film's
there's too
been
much
put
of the
together.
opposite of that spirit at the moment. That's why it kind of works, I think.
And so let me ask you a question, Cosey, about the spirit of the scene, because what comes through is the DIY thing, clearly, and the relationship to punk being an important kind of moment in kind of cultural history, but also the idea of being counterculture or underground is really resonant, and that feeds into the politics, and it feels, I said in the introduction, in a kind of comedy way about what's today, but it is a very resonant day to be showing the film, and
I'm looking at the riots and I'm thinking, yeah. Are we going to get them again, please? I was talking to Chris about it, and I was saying, it's so easy now to just detach yourself and go off into a virtual world. And I know it's like a cliche, but it's so true, is that you can escape from the reality of this very easily, and then jump out again, have a bit of a moan, then go lose yourself again. But nothing is going to change until people actually, you know, get out there and do something, because it's just hell, and it's going to be more of the same.
And at the time, when you were starting with Throbbing Gristle, and then you were realising there were like-minded musicians and cultural artists out there, was that a really strong thing binding you all together? The idea of sort of protest or being counterculture, if you like.
I think we all had the same feeling that we were quite not willing. We just did it because we felt we had to go out there and take a risk and take what flack we got for it because it had to be said. You know, and I think that's what's lacking at the moment.
It was a much slower process then, obviously, because people were writing to each other, so you had to wait for letters to arrive, and then you had to reply to them. You just didn't even know these people were out there until they contacted you. So there was that. That was a major obstacle, really.
And that was a great communication tool, because you also didn't have cheap flights then. everyone takes that for granted as well, that it cost a hell of a lot of money, and it would have been the price of like some new bass bins or speakers or something for us to get to just go to Europe or something, forget it. So yeah, the mail was the main thing, and we would send out like industrial newsletters, and before that there was mail out anyway. So there was a kind of international network building. So we were in touch with people that were into Dadaism and everything in America and all over the world.
It was word of mouth, really, wasn't it? Then it was.
Yeah. And snail mail. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Even when I was a wrecker of civilization, I didn't regard myself as a feminist. I mean, I was chased through the ITA gallery by the feminists from Spare Rib, you know, just wanting to lynch me. So I've always felt...
Why?
Because I was exploiting my body as in the sex magazines. But whether I was doing it from choice or for other reasons, it didn't make any difference. But I don't know. I still struggle with the term feminism, because I've gone through the whole of my life not regarding myself as a woman or a man. I've just worked with people, and I've worked with myself. And I find it quite divisive to sort of maintain that kind of separation, if you like. And I know how important it is for human beings to be equal. It doesn't matter what gender they are, transgender, anything. So it's a real struggle, and I don't know how we're going to come to terms with it, other than, I mean, I've lived my life great, and I still do, just as myself. I don't really present myself as a woman doing anything, or as a feminist. I'm just free. I think the idea was to just sort of make people break out of their complacency in a creative way rather than a destructive way. Because I always found punk rather dark and nihilistic, and I think some people may think TG was, but we offered a lot of positive things about that. We were just saying, you accept this, you acknowledge it, and you work from here, you know. So that's it. I don't
It's
know.
difficult to say. You'd have to ask young musicians, really. We're sort of way past it. It's not really a question for us, I don't think.
Well, Amélie said you're a DJ, aren't you?
Well, yeah, Amélie.
What do you
Over
think?
to you.
Well, I don't know. I think people always get inspired. You know, there's always something interesting out there. You just have to find it, and you know, find out what you like, and find out what inspires you, and do your own stuff. I think that's it.
I think people often say about, you know, doing something new, and it's something you said about your film, is that when you went out looking for it, you couldn't find it, and that's what I think inspired us most of all, is that the kind of music, well, for me, that I really wanted to hear, that made me feel like it spoke to me, wasn't there. So I kind of had to make it myself.
I think it also depends on what reason you're doing it as well. That had a lot to do with we weren't doing it as a career move. A lot of people now do it as a career move. Maybe that's the biggest difference.
And Cosey and Chris, just in terms from your perspective, do you feel as though the film captures in some way the feeling of what it was like when the scene was first kind of emerging?
Yeah, well, I know everybody in it, so it's hard for me to say. I mean, it's a bit like you know, it was quite odd.
It was quite evocative though, at that time.
And
I think it was quite representative. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen another sort of 10 or 20 minutes of it, I think.
Yeah, I think there was elements in it where, like you were saying, where you can hear the tribal element of industrial music really start kicking off. And that's what everybody at the gigs and that where it just took you somewhere else. It was so powerful.
Yeah.
But you couldn't, like they said, you know, like Graham said, you can't get that on record or film. You have to be in the room.
Yeah.
It's
So-
very difficult to capture those performances. That most of those performances, they are those you had to have been there moments, you know, because it's so physical.
Yeah.
And that's the only thing it didn't capture. But I mean, it got pretty close.